Welcome to a Friday evening brewing knowledge session. It's always wonderful to be here, to be reading together. And no matter how many people show up, we are trying our best to read with whoever comes and find some joy in reading, find some joy in sharing, and also listening to each other. So, as many of you maybe remember or do not remember, last time we had talked about something called metacognition. So, did any of you have a chance to think about what metacognition means, or what does it mean to you, or what does it mean technically, or from dictionary, anything that anyone would like to share? What metacognition is? It appeared in our reading last week. Would anyone want to take a chance with what they think metacognition means? No one. Okay, I'm still going to put it in the chat so that if you get time in between the session to Google what metacognition means, you can.
Method of understanding oneself. Okay, our thinking process and all those things. So
Yes,
that is cognition.
yes,
Okay, and it helps us understand ourselves better. If we are really into metacognition, if we are really trying to analyze the way we think, why we think, how the thought process comes over, what does it lead to? So it helps us understand ourselves better and then move on to um, being more productive in a way, we can say.
yes. Thank you, Minakshi ji, and thank you for joining. Sakshi, Swati, Reena ji, welcome. Okay. So the last time when we were reading, we also talked about one student or one boy being very good at chess, and the country asking that child to make a military strategy. And if any of you remember that, this is what it maybe is the recap of what we read last week. In other words, the chess champion will not be able to do much to save his country, although if he was sent off to compete in an international checkers competition, he would do extremely well. Okay, so I'm going to start reading from here, and I hope some of you can follow. And if you have any questions, any thoughts in between, please feel free to share in the chat. An example of the research that triggered this view is the famous study done many years ago by William Chase and Herbert Simon on chess experts and novices. The experimenters laid out 25 pieces on a chessboard, either in random positions or in according to actual possible game scenarios, and then asked people to reproduce those boards from memory. The experts had a far superior memory of actual game board placements, recalling almost all positions correctly. Not surprising, but with random placements, they were able to recall the positions of only about 6 pieces. The novices, on the other hand, recalled about 6 positions in either condition. Thus, being an expert in a domain had nothing to do with better memorization strategies in general. In a minor way, our students are often like the chess champion. They have learned how to analyze a piece of text in an English class, but they won't automatically do it in a history class. They have mastered the skill of drawing graphs in a mathematics class, but they won't automatically use those skills in a science class. It simply doesn't occur to them to do so. This is called the problem of transfer, and for years psychologists have researched the question of whether learning can be transferred from one context to another. Otherwise, of Otherwise, of what use is the learning? Although initial results seem to show that transfer does not happen, in the 1980s, psychologists began to discover that there are conditions under which students do transfer skills and strategies to new domains. In other words, become intelligent novices. First, they establish something we have all experienced, that there are students for whom this happens effortlessly, spontaneously. You could say that some students are naturally intelligent novices. They seem able to bring their knowledge to bear in new situations. They ask useful questions. And the interesting thing you notice is that they learn quickly in a wide variety of contexts. We need not, however, end on the note that some students can and some cannot. For example, I've heard that while some people are naturally great golfers, there are also programs of training that makes the skills of golf strokes quite explicit. Such training might not produce a Tiger Woods, but it certainly can develop competent golfers. As Brewer says, we are not explicit enough in teaching our students simple strategies such as how to read for understanding. And psychologists have shown that such explicit training does improve students' use of strategies in new situations. Similarly, they have found that although some students naturally develop good metacognitive skills, these too can be trained explicitly. Would any of you want to take a chance and share anything about what does how to read for understanding mean to you? आपके लिए समझने के लिए पढ़ने का मतलब क्या है? What does it mean to read to understand or to teach how to read for understanding? Would anyone like to take a guess, share something?
See, whatever these research says about the inability of our mind to transfer knowledge to another field, I mean, I don't know. I personally, I've never had any problems. Okay, maybe the way
Mm.
I was taught right from childhood, I've never had problems. I do find children having that sort of a problem nowadays more rather than you know, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay. And I find it a little, I wonder why. Okay. Here it is mentioned that it is normally people cannot transfer knowledge from one field to another. And hence they find it difficult to connect knowledge and, complete their understanding of anything. So personally, I've never had that situation. And maybe that's one of the reasons why sometimes while teaching students, maybe I'd face a because to me, logicalizing is something that one can do very easily. Okay, so but at the same time, I mean, of course, if a person finds it difficult to connect, say, a knowledge, something that is learned in English to science or maths or history or something, then obviously learning will become very difficult for them. The thinking process will also get limited, and then we need to tell them how to connect. I mean, we need to tell them how to connect. That, for example, let's take, for example, spellings in English. There.
Mm-hmm.
The phonetics is the same all over, whether it's English,
Yeah,
math,
yeah,
science, it cannot change.
yeah.
Okay. Statistics again. If you are you've learned statistics, whether you use it in physics or whether you use it in economics or for that matter history or anything, it cannot change. The process will be the same, only the area of application changes, and one should be able to apply. And that is what makes life connected and easier. In this way, if we don't want our life to become so difficult that we can't connect one thing with another. So that's
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Minakshi ji, for sharing. Psychologist Scott Paris and his colleagues developed a program in the 1980s called Informed Strategies for Learning, whose main intent was to make essential reading and metacognitive skills explicit for students. In their words, the program would illustrate strategies concretely and show children the effort required and the benefits derived from their use. Habits and assumptions of reading were also highlighted explicitly, and students were shown how some strategies are effective and some are not. For example, they were taught that the main goal of reading is to understand the meaning, not to read quickly without mistakes. Skimming is a quick way of finding out what the text is about, and it is not the practice of reading the short words and leaving out the long words. During reading, just as while solving a puzzle, you need to stop in the middle to see if you're understanding what you read. The psychologists also use traffic sign analogies to make the strategies more memorable. For instance, stop meant to think and say it in your own words. Speed limit meant to adjust the speed of reading to the difficulty level of the text. Dead end meant to go back and reread parts not understood well. Curves meant to skip the hard parts, which was a bad strategy and one that was to be avoided. For teaching metacognition, we must make students become their own critics. If you correct your students' work in front of them, making explicit the criteria you use by thinking aloud, then the next step can be for them to correct their own work in front of you. Gradually, they internalize the process of self correction. In a classroom, thinking aloud and commenting on each other's thinking is very useful for making metacognitive strategies explicit. It would be wonderful for us to take this back to our classrooms and see the difference. स्वाति जी, रीना जी, साक्षी जी, आप सबके लिए ये बहुत ही एक इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ है जो आप लोग सब ट्राई कर सकते हैं आपकी क्लास में। इसमें यहाँ पे ये बता रहे हैं कि अगर आपको अपने बच्चों की नोटबुक्स चेक करनी है और अगर आप उनकी नोटबुक्स उनके सामने चेक करते हैं और आप उनको उनकी गलतियां अपने मन में ना सोचकर अपने मन में सोच के बोल रहे हैं कि यहाँ पे ए शायद ऐसा ही होना चाहिए था क्योंकि ए जो है फुल स्टॉप के बाद कैपिटल होता है अगर वो प्रॉपर नाउन है। वर्ब में इसमें आईएनजी होना चाहिए था और आईएनजी के आई के ऊपर डॉट होना चाहिए था अगर आप छोटे बच्चों को सिखा रहे हैं। तो जब आप बच्चों को चेक करते वक्त उनके सामने ये बोल के बताएंगे कि आप क्या चेक कर रहे हैं और ये क्यों गलत है तो बच्चे ये इसको इंटरनलाइज कर लेंगे, वो समझ जाएंगे कि क्या गलती है, कैसे गलती को पकड़ना है और वो अपने आप ये करने की कोशिश करेंगे। मायरा, वेलकम, आर यू हियर? Can't hear you.
Uh, Ma'am,
Yes,
can you hear me?
yes, I can. Thanks for joining, Myra. Have you
Thank
ever
you, ma'am.
witnessed or experienced something like this? Where a teacher has maybe corrected your work in front of you and voiced out what is the method they're using to check your work.
Yes, ma'am. A lot of time this has happened. Whenever the teacher is in our class and she's checking our notebook, she calls us one by one and she checks our notebooks in front of us. And I feel like one advantage of this is that we get to know that where we are wrong, because most of the times when students receive their notebooks, they don't even flip through to see if they have any notes or where they have made errors. But this way, teachers are able to explain that how they can improve and what they have done right or wrong.
Yes. Thanks, Myra. I think whenever something comes from students themselves, like you here, it always creates more impact on teachers in our group. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Although these suggestions may seem narrow in scope, related to academic school tasks only, Brewer says that the mastery of the enabling or tool domains of reading, writing, and mathematics and science will bring about high order cognitive skills in all our students. Armed with these, they can tackle advanced learning in specialized areas more effectively, be intelligent novices. In order for this to work, we must be as aware of how we teach as what we teach. In the Indian context, we must remember that a syllabus is only a part of a curriculum that includes methods, approaches, emphasis, and attitudes. Our aim must include the teaching of high order skills to our students and not be limited to the transmission of knowledge and facts. On a different note, I must mention here that there have been attempts to boost IQ scores. Specifically, here the goal is more straightforward, if quite narrow, and the outcomes easily measurable. Most such attempts, such as the Head Start program in the US, look for increases in IQ test scores, the IQ intelligent equation again. They concentrate on the early childhood or preschool age group and extend over a few years. Their results are typically small gains in IQ scores, which often do not last beyond a few years after the program. But by far the most successful program in raising IQ levels has always been hold your breath, regular schooling. Research shows clearly that children who spend more time in school have higher IQs at a modest rate of about 2 IQ points a year. Now, you might suspect that the relationship is in the other direction, that the higher one's IQ, the longer one is likely to spend in school. But the research has been able to determine that schooling causes the increase in IQ, or to be more precise, prevents its decline. This should not be surprising, since IQ tests are so closely tied to academic skills. Stephen Ceci, a psychologist with a deep interest in intelligence and schooling, has reviewed a large body of literature on the relationship between the two. He finds that starting school late or dropping out early led to declines in IQ. One such study reported that South African Indian children who started school later than their peers in similar villages, because a teacher was unfortunately not available for up to 4 years, lost an average of 5 IQ points for every year of delayed schooling. One of his most curious findings is that IQ scores declined slightly during the long summer holidays, something I've often suspected about myself actually. Ceci reports that school quality is not a factor in this relationship, but his results are primarily from Europe and the US. Simply going to school for several years, even if it is of low quality, will help boost IQ. But the schooling IQ relationship has not been replicated in India. The quality of education children receive here varies dramatically and can be extremely poor. Many Indian educational experts say that we need to move from increasing enrollment and retention in our schools to improving quality. It is quite likely that thousands of children in state schools here are gaining next to nothing from the hours they spend in school. In conclusion, the research summarized here certainly encourages us to broaden our view of intelligence. But more important than that, it leads us to question the strong link society has made between a particular definition of intelligence, as measured by the IQ test, and the worth or value of a human being. It is true that whatever the IQ test measures is an interesting aspect of human ability. In today's world, that ability is very important in school and higher education and fairly important in the real world, depending on one's vocation. Gottfredson suggests that IQ is more important in complex life settings where there is novelty, unpredictability, and ambiguity, and less important in life settings which call for simple problem solving. Conventional, distorted ideas of intelligence in various social settings can only be changed when we begin to value each and every person for the skills they have worked on. Everyone can make a contribution to society, and every contribution is valuable. We have moved very far away from this basic truth. Recently, a student told me, my mother, she can't do math and stuff like that, but she knows how to manage anything. She can really get things done. And a highly educated gentleman told me on the phone some months ago, my granddaughter has just finished her 10th standard. Unfortunately, she's not so good at mathematics and science, but. And he proceeded to tell me all the wonderful things she does do, which included a passion for the fine arts and learning several languages. In the next chapter, we look at all the important question of motivation in school learning. Interestingly, that chapter ends with a story of how a student's understanding of intelligence can affect his or her motivation for challenging work. That's a very important part and something to think about, even about your motivation to come to a reading session like this. Sorry, please give me a moment. I think there's something wrong with the. Okay. Are you all able to see the illustration here about motivation? What do you all understand by motivation? What is your motivation? What is something that is driving you right now in life? Would anyone like to share what is driving them in life right now? स्वाति जी, रीना जी, साक्षी जी, आजकल आपको सबसे ज्यादा क्या चीज प्रेरणा दे रही है या आपको मोटिवेट कर रही है आगे बढ़ने के लिए, अपने ऊपर काम करने के लिए? सबसे ज्यादा क्या मोटिवेट कर रहा है? नीतू जी, आप भी शेयर कर सकते हैं. एंड Myra, even you can share. Minakshi ji, anyone who would like to share. What is your motivation right now? Would anyone like to go and unmute and share with the group?
मैं तो हर बार ही शेयर करती हूँ। मैं सोच रही थी इस बार कोई करेगा, साक्षी या रीना या कोई, दोनों साक्षी हैं, स्वाति हैं कुछ। आप लोगों को प्रोत्साहित कौन करता है, क्या करता है, कौन या क्या?
मैम मैं समझी नहीं, आप दोबारा समझ।
मतलब आपको जिंदगी में आगे बढ़ने के लिए प्रोत्साहन कहाँ से मिलता है? क्या
मैम
ऐसा चीज बात है जिसके चलते आप जिंदगी में आगे बढ़ना चाहती हैं?
मैम खुद से ही।
खुद से ही ना? हाँ, वो तो अंदर से आवाज आती है, ये बात, इसमें तो कोई शक नहीं है। कहीं ना कहीं अंदर से आवाज आती है, फिर हम उस डायरेक्शन में आगे बढ़ जाते हैं। लेकिन वो कौन सी सोच है जिसके चलते आपको ऐसा लगता है कि हाँ, इस डायरेक्शन में अभी अगर कुछ है जिंदगी में, या कभी पहले भी हुआ होगा?
हम्म,
साक्षी जी, आपके अंदर से भी अगर आवाज आती है तो वो किस तरीके से आती है कि मुझे अपने लिए आगे करना है, पर क्यों करना है, उससे क्या होगा?
यही मैम कि मैं बेहतर बनूं।
हम्म, बेहतर इंसान बने,
यस मैम।
बेहतर काम कर सकें जो भी आप कर रही हैं।
यस मैम।
थैंक
और
अच्छा,
यू।
मैं एक
सबको
चीज
अच्छा
पूछ
भी लगे।
हाँ, मैं एक चीज पूछना चाहती हूँ। जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल आपको लग रहा है कि आपको बेहतर इंसान बनना है ना, और उसके लिए आप काम कर रही हैं, तो फिर एक बार दिमाग में आ जाता है बेहतर इंसान बनना है या बेहतर टीचर बनना है या बेहतर बेटी बनना, जो भी है ना। तो उसके बाद आपके अंदर से और भी आवाज आती है कि बेहतर, ये ऐसे बेहतर बनने के लिए ये भी कर सकते हैं, ये भी कर सकते हैं, ये भी कर सकते हैं। 3-4 तरह के आइडियाज आ जाते हैं, उसके बाद आप कोई एक आइडिया पे वर्क करती हैं।
यस मैम, 3-4 आइडिया जैसे किसी और को देखते हैं कि हाँ ये काम कर रहे हैं तो हम भी करते
हाँ,
सो
मैम।
ट्रू, दैट्स वेरी ट्रू। साक्षी जी, ये मेरे साथ भी होता है। मुझे शायद किसी और को देख के, उनका उदाहरण देखकर मुझे और मोटिवेटेड फील होता है।
यस मैम,
मैं ये
लगता
कर
है कि
सकती
हम
हूँ।
भी करते मतलब ये सब।
हाँ, थैंक यू साक्षी जी।
थैंक यू।
थैंक यू मीनाक्षी जी, आपने साक्षी जी को इंसिस्ट किया शेयर करने के लिए। आप में से कोई और शेयर करना चाहेगा? Myra, would you like to share what is your current motivation in life?
Ma'am, I don't think I found my specific motivation, but just that I have to do something different and be like not live a ordinary life.
And different in terms of your vocation.
Yes, ma'am.
Hmm. Thanks, Myra. रीना जी, आपके अंदर की क्या मोटिवेशन है अभी?
मैम, हमें अपना काम अच्छे से करना चाहिए।
हम्म, काम अच्छे से करना चाहिए। पर ये मोटिवेशन कैसे है रीना जी? ये आपको,
जैसे मैम किसी को
हाँ,
देख के कुछ सीखते हैं, ऐसे ही हो सकता है हमें भी देख के कोई सीख रहा हो।
हम्म, दैट्स वेरी ट्रू।
ये ना
थैंक
मेरी एक फ्रेंड होती थी बचपन में, नीलोफर पाशा, वो बोलती थी बहुत सारी लड़कियां कंप्लेन करती थी कि उनको डांट पड़ता अच्छा नहीं लगता है, और वो बोलती थी नहीं, मुझे तो बुरा नहीं लगता है, क्योंकि मेरे भाई बहन मुझे देखकर सीखेंगे। तो अगर मेरे पेरेंट्स मुझे डांट रहे हैं तो मतलब मेरे भलाई के लिए, और प्लस मेरे सारे भाई बहन लोग भी तो अच्छे चीज सीखेंगे। एंड दैट वाज लाइक क्वाइट एन आई ओपनर फॉर मी ऑल्सो, कि उस एज में तो हम लोग कंप्लेन करते हैं, है ना, और कम लोग ऐसे सोचते हैं कि हमें डांट पड़ रही है तो एक अपनी भी फायदा, अपना फायदा तो दूर का, अपने भाई बहन को भी फायदा हो जाएगा, वो लोग भी अच्छा चीज सीखेंगे। एवरीथिंग डिपेंड्स ऑन मी, ऑल यंगर पीपल विल बी लर्निंग थ्रू मी। तो ये दैट्स अ वेरी गुड थिंग टू से। रीना, अच्छी अच्छी बात बोला, आपको देखकर भी कोई सीख रहा होगा।
थैंक यू मैम।
thank you all so much. It it really it really does something to my day when I hear from all of you, और स्पेशली हमारे टीचर्स से जब कुछ सुनने के लिए मिलता है, वो चाहे एक दो सेंटेंसेस भी हों, बहुत खुशी होती है, और एक अलग तरीके की खुशी होती है। थैंक यू मीनाक्षी जी फॉर मोटिवेटिंग देम। Okay, so we are going to start this chapter called motivation. It's a new chapter and something, a word that we all have, and I'm sure we must have heard. Sorry, my system is acting up a little bit today, so excuse all this for these things coming up on the screen. What makes us do the things we do? What motivates us to begin an activity and keep it up until some goal is achieved? Sometimes, even in the face of great difficulty. The answer to this question can vary from person to person and from situation to situation, but there is a universal aspect to motivation as well, since all human beings have the capacity to be motivated. It is important to keep in mind that when we say someone is unmotivated, it is probably because he is not doing the things we want him to do. As teachers, we know that if our students are motivated to learn, our work becomes a pleasure. When motivation for schoolwork is lacking, all our teaching efforts seem to disappear into a black hole, leading ultimately to frustration. Thus, an important question is, how do I motivate my students to learn? Psychologists have traditionally talked about two kinds of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic. Have you ever watched a small baby trying to turn over onto its stomach for the first time? You must have. Notice the determination, the single minded focus, the persistence till the goal was achieved. Why do babies work so hard to learn and practice all the things they accomplish in their first few years? If you reply for the simple joy of it or something similar, then you have described a situation of internal or intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is something within us that drives us to accomplish certain goals, to be competent, to feel a sense of freedom and autonomy. तो जैसे साक्षी पाल मैम बोल रही थी कि अंदर से आता है, तो वो उनकी इंट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन है. We see it in play, in exploration, in challenge seeking, in any unforced willing activity. In fact, psychologists say that from an evolutionary standpoint, motivation is an absolute necessity for all humans because it drives us to action that is good for our survival. However, and this is very important to us teachers, at some point during childhood, we see that there are increasingly long lists of things that children are not intrinsically motivated to do. And on this long list are more and more the tasks demanded by school. Even activities such as cleaning that once were done as play are now resisted and avoided as work. At this point, to get children to do what we want them to, we begin to introduce external consequences such as rewards and punishments. We also start saying things like, if you do this, then, and do it or else. If a child engages in an activity, either to avoid a punishment or to gain a reward, we say the activity is externally or extrinsically motivated. Thus, we enter an endless loop of promising and threatening to bring about the behaviors we want from children. Well, so what you might wonder, if the child is doing what is required of her, what does it matter why she does it? Many systems in the world run smoothly on planned, deliberate systems of extrinsic motivation, threats and promises, rewards and punishments. Examples of such systems are religious traditions, modern corporate houses, schools, and institutions of higher learning. I certainly recognize that extrinsic motivators are the quickest and simplest fix in most situations, because most, though not all, people respond to these in predictable ways. Extrinsic motivation is what makes the world go around, but not quite. Alongside such systems, humans have always also encouraged different ways of motivating people through understanding, challenge, creating awareness, and self exploration. We have imposed fines on polluters, but we also run awareness campaigns about the state of the environment. We promise heaven and good karma, but we also appeal to human empathy and compassion. I think nobody is more closely involved with these two motivational systems, the extrinsic and the intrinsic, than a school teacher. Teachers really struggle with these issues. Although the educational system has put in place many extrinsic motivators, teachers are closest to the learning process and can clearly see the difference between when a child is intrinsically motivated. Naturally, teachers want students who are curious and interested in schoolwork and will leave school with a love of learning for its own sake. In other words, more than motivation to perform, which is probably widespread in Indian schools, teachers aim for motivation to learn. But this wish is not easily fulfilled. There are many possible reasons for the lack of intrinsic motivation among school children: emotional or physical insecurity and ill health, evolutionary constraints, the lack of perceived control over the learning process, the misuse of rewards, irrelevance of material and difficult level of work, the classroom environment, and most importantly, the teacher behaviors and student beliefs. In this chapter, I describe these factors in turn and in the process suggest various ways to boost sagging motivation levels in our classrooms. मुझे आपसे एक सवाल है, साक्षी जी, रीना जी, स्वाति जी, आप में से कोई भी एक या फिर आप तीनों के लिए है ये सवाल। आपको सबसे ज्यादा अ, दिक्कत कब होती है पढ़ाने में? जब बच्चे अंदर से नहीं सीखना चाहते या फिर आपके पास कुछ देने के लिए नहीं होता? सपोज आपने प्रॉमिस किया कि अगर आप ये पढ़ोगे तो मैं आपको एक कलर का बॉक्स दूंगी, तो आपको उस दिन आसानी लगती होगी ना शायद पढ़ाने में।
यस मैम।
पर
मैम,
अगर हाँ जी।
जब बच्चे अंदर से नहीं सीखना चाहते मतलब तब।
ऐसा क्यों होता है साक्षी जी? और ये ये हम अंदर से कैसे सीखने के
मैम
लिए अंदर से कैसे पैदा कर सकते हैं?
मैम यही जैसे कि मतलब क्लास में मैम 10-12 बच्चे हैं और मैम जैसे क्या कहते हैं 8 बच्चों ने जवाब दे दिया मतलब किसी चीज का, और फिर हमने उस बच्चे को दोबारा भी बताया मैम, जो मतलब नहीं समझ पाया और बहुत इजीली बता दिया मैम, तब भी वो सीखना नहीं चाहते, तब भी ये बोल देते हैं कि नो मैम। तो फिर ऐसा लगता है कि शायद ये सीखना ही नहीं चाहते मतलब।
तो कभी आपने बच्चों से पूछा है कि वो क्यों नहीं सीखना चाहते हैं, उनको इसमें क्या इंटरेस्टिंग नहीं लग रहा है?
मैम हमारे सामने बोलते हैं कि हाँ मैम समझ में आ गया, यस मैम, लेकिन जब पूछते हैं तो मैम तब थोड़ा यही रहता है, झिझक रहती है मतलब मैम बच्चों के अंदर।
क्या आपके अंदर वो झिझक है साक्षी जी? जब आप अपने किसी सीनियर इंसान से मिलती हैं, आपको ये झिझक महसूस होती है?
यस मैम, हाँ होती है मैम कभी कभी।
क्योंकि अक्सर हमारे बच्चे क्लास में वही चीजें करते हैं जो वो हमें करते हुए देखते हैं। तो अगर बच्चे हमें देखते हैं कि हम अपनी चीजें खुलेआम बोल रहे हैं, खुले दिल से बोल रहे हैं और सबको रिस्पेक्ट करते हुए बोल रहे हैं, तो वो भी वही सीख जाते हैं जल्दी से।
यहाँ पे निलाशी मैं कहूंगी, एक आध बच्चों का जो मैंने देखा है, जो सुना
यस।
है, कुछ बच्चों को ऐसा लगता है कि पढ़ लिख कर भी कोई खास फायदा तो है नहीं, करना तो वही
हम्म।
है जो सब कोई मतलब उनके आसपास लोग कर रहे हैं, है ना। तो वो भी एक रीजन हो जाता है। जैसे हम कोई चीज समझा रहे हैं तो उनको लगता है कोई मतलब ही नहीं है इससे, लाइफ में हमको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ना है ना। तो वो जो एक नेगेटिव एटीट्यूड टुवर्ड्स एजुकेशन है, वो भी प्रॉबेबली रीजन है। और उसका रीजन मेरे ख्याल से इंडिया का जो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट स्टैंडर्ड्स है और लोगों
हम्म।
का जो एटीट्यूड है कि गवर्नमेंट सब चीज करेगी, क्योंकि एजुकेशन के साथ आप क्रिएट कर सकते हैं अपॉर्चुनिटीज। और वो चीज अगर हम इनको समझा सकें तो शायद वो ज्यादा मोटिवेटेड होंगे कि हाँ तुम कुछ कर सकोगे। ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है कि कोई और ही तुम्हारे लिए करे, गवर्नमेंट जॉब्स दे या कोई पब्लिक सेक्टर में हो। आजकल तो स्टार्टअप्स का भी बहुत है, एंड सर्विसेज इतने सारे देने हैं लोगों को, सब बहुत सर्विसेज का जरूरत है। तो an educated person can take advantage of the situation. It is not always that you need to depend on others to get started. Let's put it that way.
तो मीनाक्षी जी, आप जो बोल रही हैं, दैट्स मोर लाइक children not finding any extrinsic motivation to study. But they also
intrinsic.
do not have any intrinsic motivation to study.
They don't have, and it's rather, I mean, not very young students do that. They're slightly the older ones, okay, because the younger ones don't know that. They may simply not, they may not be able to study because there's nobody to guide them. ओके सो दैट इज ऑल्सो लैक ऑफ मोटिवेशन कुछ वो उनको नहीं आ रहा है करना तो स्कूल की टीचर्स ही हैं जितना देर वो दे सकती घर से तो कोई सपोर्ट उनको खास है नहीं बिकॉज दे आर फर्स्ट जनरेशन लर्नर्स राइट सो दैट इज वन रीजन बट बड़े बच्चों में थोड़ा सा ये भी पाया गया है कि वो कहीं से सुन लिए हैं शायद कि या देख लिए हैं लोगों को कि बार बार ट्राई कर रहे गवर्नमेंट सर्विसेज के लिए हो नहीं पा रहा है या कुछ ऐसा
Hmm.
चीज जिसके चलते उनको लगता है कि कोई खास फायदा नहीं है ना पढ़ने से तो वो एक आध बच्चों के मुंह से मैंने सुना है तो मेरे ख्याल से कुछ और लोग भी ये तो थोड़े से वैसे बच्चे होंगे जो अपने को एक्सप्रेस कर देते होंगे हर बच्चा
Right.
अपने को एक्सप्रेस करता भी नहीं है ना तो वो है
Thank you, Minakshi, for sharing. And like my favorite thing to ask Myra, because we always get a different spin on things hearing from a student themselves. Myra, do you ever feel this disconnect between studies and real world about what Minakshi ji is mentioning?
Ma'am, can you repeat?
Do you ever feel a disconnect of the academic work or things happening at school from the real world and what the real world asks of you?
Yes, ma'am. A lot of time it happens, and not all the things that are taught, like academic wise, are also applied in the real life. And sometimes we just have to take things with a in different situations. Not the same thing will be useful.
Hmm. And do you then still keep finding meaning in what you are doing at school?
Yes, ma'am. Because we have to. If we don't, then schoolwork will just be like a responsibility, and if we treat studies like that, then I don't think that we will be motivated enough to do our studies and do well in school.
see
Hmm.
very often in school people think that the only thing that we are teaching them is something like 2H2 plus O2 makes it water 2H2O and where is the real life application of it but the things that grow while we are teaching all those things is one is discipline okay the second thing is your ability to memorize and connect okay of course you won't do a 2H2 plus O2 is equal to 2H2O and that is water and we are not going to go and make water but then we learn how lots of things happen in that manner you don't two things mix together and a new thing comes up and in the world it is always like that all these teachings are very subtle if you can understand that and you can connect it with your real life then it is a different thing but if you really want to start questioning what will we do that Babar came to India in 1526 okay so and of what use it is to us these are the questions that children ask us yeah Babar came to India in 1526 may not have much value as the date, but the sequence of events tells us how human beings developed.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's how we connect information and how we and what we understand out of it. Because what happened in 1526 till now will give us some idea as to what will happen if we do a certain thing right now at a later period of time like for what is the reason that the United Nations organization is putting in such a lot of effort in world peace and is trying to bring about almost equitable distribution of wealth should we say or facilities to all everybody's let's put why is that important for peace so it may not make sense to us because peace and distribution of food and health and health facilities and education how is it connected to peace but it is so that is something that you may not we have to like this is where we talk about connecting dots connecting what we have learned and transfer of knowledge let's put it that way okay Some things we need to do, we need to work it out in our minds. This is, and logicalize it ourselves. If every meaning is told to us, then our brain rusts, isn't it?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and okay, sometimes it is a little far fetched. Like right now, I'm talking, it might sound a little far fetched, but that's what the human mind is supposed to be like. We are trying to sharpen it and get it ready for the coming years to solve problems, right? So that is how it is. I mean, and it's nice, Myra, that I always like talking to young children when they question things. It's great to talk to you. Please
Yeah.
continue asking things. It's nice to
Yeah,
be
it's
able to.
always nice to hear different ideas from students. And that's why I think Sandeep sir, and now even I would like to insist that Myra maybe invites other students from her own class. Or Myra, if you have any ideas for brewing knowledge that you think might be interesting to students your age in terms of reading and discussing something like this, it would be wonderful to hear.
Ma'am, I definitely will ask a few of my friends because I feel like a lot of people in my friend group really like debating and discussing on topics. Like often we just sit down and we just ask our English teacher कि मैम आज बस एक टॉपिक दे दो, we'll just debate today, and we just like to discuss and share our own views, and the whole class likes it. So I think that people will enjoy these sessions.
That'll be wonderful. So maybe if you figure out the details of it and maybe send me a message or an email, whatever works for you, that would be wonderful to hear.
नीतू
Okay,
मैम is almost quiet. मैम आपको कुछ बोलना है?
Sorry, I know Minakshi ji that you are taking on a very, very kind note of inviting Neetu ma'am. And Neetu ma'am, it
No,
would be wonderful that
actually we've been talking
आज
to
मैं
everybody, but so
सुन
that's
रही
why.
हूँ मैम, आज मेरा फर्स्ट टाइम है, आज मैं सिर्फ सुन रही हूँ.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So, thank you all for joining. It's wonderful to hear from so many people, hear different voices, and to discuss something very close to all of us' heart, which is about education, reading, teaching, and learning processes. So, I will see you next week on Friday, same time, 5:30 on Zoom. Thank you.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.